So we'll go ahead and get started since it's a little after 6. So I'll call the meeting to order and welcome everyone. And we'll wait till the conversation ends. And now we'll have roll call, and Trustee McDonald is on her way. Trustee Kendall is out of town, and I think that is everyone else is here. So we will go ahead and say the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you could stand. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now, item number 3 on the agenda is to review, revise, and approve the agenda. Is there anyone who has a request to somehow modify the agenda as it has been printed? Seeing no one indicating as such, then we'll go ahead and approve the agenda as it's been set. Item number 4A is the Board of Trustee regular meeting minutes from January 14th. Is anyone want to make any modifications to those minutes? Seeing no requests, then is there a motion to approve the minutes from the January 14th regular meeting? Moved by Trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Lorenzen. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. 4B is the regular meeting minutes from January 28th. Are there any requests for any type of modification to them? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of January 28th? Moved by Trustee Wake. Is there a second? Second by Trustee Lorenzen. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And now we move on to student trustee, public comment. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? I don't see anyone moving toward the podium. So now we'll come to student trustee reports. We can start with Willard, then we can do Sentinel. We have Abe's in writing, and we'll be calling Celie Swan. So I think we've got everyone big sky tonight.
Hello everyone, I'm Wayra Oderman from Willard, and let me get my thing open. We have the Willard Dance coming in the weekend of May, which is going to be really exciting. This is our second dance ever. Last year was our first dance that we've ever had, and that was really amazing. We have the Big Sky Documentary Film Festival coming up, which we're going to have a lot of guest speakers and documentarians coming in and talking to us and showing us their movies. I'm actually submitting my own film to the festival, and I do encourage everyone to come see it on the 21st at the ZAC at 4 p.m. And you can say that louder. Okay, my documentary is premiering on the 21st at 4 p.m. at the ZAC, and I encourage everyone to come see it. And we'll be playing it at the school too. Student portfolios are coming up on the 5th and 6th of March. That's where each student comes in and comes with their parents, and they show them all of the classes they've had throughout the year, throughout the semester, and then they just show off everything they've done, all their accomplishments, all their fun stuff they've done in their classes. And we have about 80 to 90% of the parents come to the portfolios. Our third semester is starting on March 4th, and that's really exciting because we've been having a blast. And we're hoping to graduate up to 20 students by the end of the third trimester. So thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Isaac Odegaard. I hope your week is going well and that you're doing all right with all of the recent snow and ice outside. The end of January and beginning of February at Sentinel has brought with it some excellent performances by many students in many different activities. Speech and debate recently competed at state, where they took home 4th place, edging out Billings Senior by 3 points. 7 different teams or individuals made it to semifinals for Sentinel, and a stunning 12 teams or individuals finaled for the team, including Colin Baker, who placed first in legislative debate. Also, Meredith Britt, a teacher at Sentinel who coaches the team, has been nominated for AA Debate Coach of the Year. The winner will be decided in early March. Sentinel Speech and Debate's final tournament occurs in 2 weeks when they will compete at the national qualifier. In another excellent performance by Sentinel students, Sentinel is sending 4 students, Chance Lockwood, Clara Hahn, Morgan Sandow, and Gracie Haitala, to district competition for Poetry Out Loud, a competition in which students recite 2 poems aloud to judges who grade based on various criteria, including accuracy. The students will be competing in both Dillon and Great Falls in the following weeks, and we wish them good luck in their representation of Sentinel. In Sentinel drama news, this last weekend on the 7th and 8th, Sentinel put on a 1-act play titled Inside Love, which was written by one of our very own seniors, Max Duprat. I've heard from other students that the play was very good. In basketball, Sentinel's boys and girls teams both played Flathead last Saturday night. The girls won 49-36 and the boys won 87-56. Both teams play this coming Thursday, with the boys playing Helena at home and the girls traveling to Helena High School to play. Sentinel also qualified 11 wrestlers for state this year. State will take place this coming Friday and Saturday in Billings. Also happening this Friday and Saturday, Sentinel is sending 22 swimmers to state, which is in Great Falls. We wish both our swimming and wrestling teams good luck in their competitions this weekend. Lastly, Sentinel would also like to recognize one of our own teachers, Mrs. Lisa Anderson, who put in a lot of time in order to make our performances at the game against Hellgate on January 31st as great as they were. As the school year moves closer to springtime, I hope you are doing well and are staying healthy. Thank you.
It's Claire, yeah.
Hello?
Hi, Claire, are you ready?
We are.
Oh,
And,
Eric's there
Eric's
too.
actually here with me tonight.
Great. Go for it.
Okay, so we're kind of going to have a busy week this week and kind of exciting. But to catch you up on last week, we had a blood drive and 7 of our students donated, which is pretty good for us. And then we also had basketball games in Drummond, and then we had a home one against Lincoln, and we did pretty good in that, so that was good. And then this weekend we play Derby away, and we have our home senior night against Victor.
The ski team went to Kimberley, Canada, like in British Columbia, for a ski race. Ski team did a downhill day and 2 races. There was a field trip. Freshman class did a field trip to the University of Montana, to the space.
Yeah, they went and saw like the planetarium.
Yeah, the planetarium. They got to explore the campus and participate in the lab as well. This coming weekend on the 15th, Destinations for Education is partnering with the lodges to host a dessert night auction fundraiser.
And then the Leo's Club is they're selling candygrams this week in celebration of Valentine's Day. So that's what we have going on.
Thanks for your update.
Yes, thank you. Unfortunately, Abe is not able to attend the board meeting today because he has an away basketball game. Good evening. Apologies for my absence tonight. I am traveling with the basketball team. With the start of second semester, matters at Hellgate are going well. This week marks the end of 2 winter sports, swimming and wrestling. Winning the last 5 state championships, Hellgate boys and girls swimmers look forward to another strong showing at state. Several wrestlers from Hellgate have qualified for state and will compete this weekend in Billings. Both boys and girls basketball teams have seen success recently, both winning in the Crosstown Games played at the Adams Center. This incredible spectacle, a massive undertaking for both Hellgate and Sentinel students and staff, was a huge success. Hellgate student government was able to raise over $3,000 from just t-shirt sales alone. The event will help improve Hellgate for years to come. In other news, Hellgate Student Government is planning on creating a new diversity-themed week sometime in the spring. The week will incorporate other clubs from Hellgate, and they would have the chance to share what we can do to make Hellgate a more accepting and diverse place. The week provides a means of cohesion between student government and the other clubs at Hellgate, which is not something that has been done in the past. Overall, things at Hellgate have been busy, but working and running according to plan. Thanks, Abe.
Thanks, and thank you all for either calling in, being here, or sending in your reports. We really appreciate hearing what's happening in the schools. So now we move on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, I don't have a lot this evening, but we'll share just a couple of announcements with everyone. So this Friday, we'll be interviewing some candidates for our special education director position. The board may recall that position was approved last year, and we had a search process last year that resulted in no candidates. So this year, we are interviewing some candidates on Friday. We're hosting a community reception, and anyone's welcome and invited to come to that. So that'll be Thursday at 3:30 in this room. We have a chance to meet the candidates. I also just wanted to report on a couple of things that happened recently. So last Thursday, Karen and I traveled with our Indian education team to Pablo to attend the tribal council for the Salish Kootenai tribes. And our Indian ed team did a great job kind of explaining the work that they do in our district to support students. They talked about all the different activities that were planned for the year, and it was very, very encouraging. The tribal council appreciated their work and were very complimentary of all the work that they're doing. So it was great just to be there with them and see how proud they were about their program in our district, and also to receive those accolades from the tribal council. So that's a requirement under the Every Student Succeeds Act, that we're required to visit the tribe closest to our district, and so I'm glad that we've got that connection. In addition to the tribal council, Karen and her team have also made really strong connections with the education department at SKC, so that was encouraging to meet them as well. Yesterday, lots of great activities for teachers, so just want to highlight a couple. In the morning, all of our K-5 teachers were together at the university. We bused all of them there just because of parking, so they met at their schools and then they got bused to the university. So I think they were kind of excited to be on a bus together, but they seemed excited anyway. But in the morning, we heard a presentation from a presenter that we brought in to talk about the importance of reading and learning and teaching and learning and data. So it was really inspiring for the teachers to hear that. In the afternoon, we participated in a collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce, and the collaboration was around getting our school counselors and our career and technical education teachers an opportunity to talk to employers in town and talk about the types of skills that employers are looking for. So it was a really great environment, lots of employers there, and our teachers sort of rotated from table to table and spent about 10 minutes with each employer and just learned about, what sorts of skills they kind of expected kids to come out of high school with, what sorts of jobs, entry-level jobs they had for high school students. So really interesting conversation. I attended, I think, maybe 8 out of the 10 tables and got a chance to meet a variety of employers, but both of those events were coordinated through Elisa's office with work from her teaching and learning side of it, plus her career and technical education side of her office. So we really appreciate all the work that went into that yesterday to coordinate those events, as well as the support from the Chamber of Commerce. We couldn't have done that event yesterday afternoon without the support of the Chamber. I wanted to remind folks that on February 25th is our next strategic planning session from 6 to 8. We are asking if you're available to come a little early at 5:15. We would like to have a shortened board meeting that evening to interview a candidate that is interested in taking the seat for that Elliot Duggar has left. So We do have one candidate that's interested, and we'd hope to interview that person at 5:15 on February 25th, if you can make it. And then also, I know there's a AA caucus phone call coming up, so I just let Ann speak to that if you would.
There is another conference call coming up for the AA caucus. This is only the AA's in the state, not anybody else. That's going to be at noon, and if you want the phone number, I have it right here. It's 866-509-3068, and the PIN number is 3, if I can read my handwriting, 9055. February 27th. Noon.
Okay, now we move on to the consent agenda, and there's one item on there which is an elementary action item, and it's a list of students who are residents of MCPS who are requesting to attend other school districts, and therefore the recommendation is that we acknowledge the attached list of elementary students requesting to attend other schools. Because it's on the consent agenda, we don't have any board discussion, but we would take a motion to approve the item on the consent agenda, which is found on page 22. Is there a motion to do so? Moved by trustee Lorenzen. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Decker. And as I said, we won't be having any board discussion, but is there any public comment? See none, then all K-12 and trustees in favor of the motion to acknowledge the MCPS student attendance agreements found on page 22, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all K-12 trustees present. Then we move on to first reading of Board Policy 8550, Cyber Incident Response. And so it looks like Ray's going to walk us through this. We did discuss it once before, and we had some comments and questions, so it looks like there's a slightly modified version that has come back to us. So if you just want to kind of walk us through what modifications were made.
Definitely. So there were some requests about removing some of the specificity of job duties and some job titles. So you'll notice that it says now District Information Technology Director or equivalent position. And then the Cybersecurity Incident Response Team all the membership is not listed out. It's a little more generic. So we'll be very specific in the procedures, but not necessarily in the policy. I believe that is it, other than, underneath where it says responsibilities of staff members, because this is a staff policy, it says all staff users instead of all users.
Thank you. Any questions for Ray? See none. The recommendation is that the board approve for first reading proposed board policy 8550 on cyber incident response, and to post it for public comment. Is there a motion to do so? Moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Smith. Is there any board discussion? I just want to thank Ray and your staff and whoever in the administration helped work on this. I know that it was prompted by other things going on, which required an additional policy. And thank you for taking the time to revisit it and respond to some of the concerns we had earlier. So thanks to everyone for doing that who was a participant. Any public comment? See none. Then all trustees in favor of approving of the motion to approve the first reading of board policy 8550 and to authorize posting for public comment, please indicate by raising their hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to another item of old business, 8A2, which is District Administration Office remodel. Under the background information, there are discussions of two different funding sources, so there would be two motions involved for elementary and high school, but I think we can discuss them more broadly in terms of overall, so I think that's primarily you, Pat.
Thank you. So the last meeting, the board talked about an increase in the budget for the remodel costs at the admin building with funding to be determined beginning tonight. we have a recommendation that supports the funding of the $365,888 increase in budget. It's listed on page 2 of the agenda. The first piece that's identified as unexpended 2020 high school building reserve permissive levy. And so beginning in 2018, the board approved permissive levy for, in the elementary and the high school to help cover certain costs associated with projects at the admin building. If you recall, we set aside design costs, funds for design, for asbestos abatement, and for roof projects. And those various projects involved permissive levy funds that were set aside. And in 2020, additional funds were set aside, a part of which were for the remodel. And those are listed in those boxes down below. In analyzing those expenditure obligations, there's 101,000 of permissive levy funds that were set aside for the project that are available. So that would have the effect of reducing the amount of additional or new funds we'd need to find to help support that project. Just for point of reference, from 2018 to 2020, the permissive levy amount totaled $2,012,000 that were set aside or earmarked for the remodel project at the administration building. And the projects, which consisted of the design, the abatement, and the roof work, totaled 1.1 million, almost 1,140,000. The remaining set aside, you'll see below, is for the remodel, the 462,540 in the elementary, and then the 308,310 in the high school. And then the residual of 101 would be applied under this scenario. So that would total the $2,012,000 that would be expended on this project through the permissive levy. For the increase in the budget, the other items that we would propose using is some interest earnings on 2 of the one-time only funds that we identified. So Roosevelt sale proceeds will be expended on that project, but we still had a year of interest earnings. So that amounted to another $30,000, and then the same on the Walla Walla rental proceeds, about $13,000. So basically utilizing all of those funds for the project, including the interest earnings that we had posted. And then finally, the residual balance of $221,000, we're recommending using a new permissive levy in 2021 under the high school. So that would be the building reserve permissive levy, a continuation of that part of the existing levy. Last year, that amount was a total of $389,000. And so there's plenty of room within the existing permissive levy. And what we're proposing is $221,000 be set aside for the completion of the remodel project. Otherwise, sort of just some facts regarding the construction that I thought I'd share. When you include the pre-remodel costs, the total construction will be $7,480,000 on final completion of the project. Based upon the various funding sources, about 64.8% of that amount is coming from the elementary and 35.2% from the high school. So with these different funding changes, that amount went from 70-30 to more of a 65-35, or 25, sorry. Went from more of a 70-30 to 65-35 split. So a little more equivalent or consistent, I guess you'd say. In terms of funding the overall projects, almost 3/4 will come from one-time only funds. So the remaining portion would be from these permissive levies. So the bulk of the construction costs will still be covered with the one-time only funds that the board's set aside for this purpose. I've identified on page 3 some alternate options for the board to consider rather than what's recommended here. In some bullet points, I've listed as a possibility one-time only sources, so that's certainly something that could be used. You'll see under the elementary block that since these funds were set aside, the rental proceeds from the Prescott rental are about $150,000 more, so that those funds were generated in both rental proceeds and interest. Then there's also some additional building reserve carryover. This doesn't encapsulate all of the one-time only funds. We still have about $1.6 million in the elementary and 1.1 in the high school that are soft money, one-time only type of funds. Other suggestions as possibilities would include the elementary budget amendment, which we'll be talking about tonight. We could use a portion of that budget amendment to support the capital improvement costs at the admin building, and then finally utilizing an intercap loan. And I've provided some of the details about the intercap loan program through the Montana Board of Investments. And it's a variable interest rate loan program, semi-annual payments. The interest rate is adjusted in February of each year, and this type of project would certainly fit within the parameters of that loan program. And I did a calculation and estimate about $61,000 of interest if we financed it over 15 years and if the interest rate stayed at the current 3.3%. So that's the background. There's quite a bit of information there to digest, but the near the top of the agenda is really the nuts and bolts of the recommendation in terms of the specific funding sources and amounts to get to that 365. And you know, I guess the good news is we've cut that back by identifying some of the unused permissive levy funds that can help reduce that amount.
Yeah, I just wondered, Pat, I know Burley's not here, but I wonder if you could clarify the contingency at the end of the project.
So when the board approved the budget of $5,975,600 for the incorporated within that budget amount was $265,000 for contingency, which represents about 5%. And so with the boost in the budget, they'll to meet some unplanned, unexpected costs. I think Burley talked about the fire sprinkler system. There was some foundation issues. There were some walls that had this mesh sort of framing. There was some exterior walls with poor R value, and then I think there was a couple other items, but it's anticipated that at the end of the day, the contingency will be there'll still be some contingency available, and to this point, we've used about $130,000 of the 265 contingency, and so it's certainly possible at the end of the day there'll still be contingency available, and I think from Burley's perspective, there's plenty of project left for unknowns, so there's still a balance of about $130,000 of contingency with this boost in the budget. To meet those requirements. We'll of course do a final analysis once the project's complete in terms of what those balances might look like.
Any questions? Trustee Lorenzen?
Okay, so the recommendation is to do this permissive levy, which will come from the taxpayers, I assume in 1 year.
Correct.
So then the money is spent out of their pockets. If we were to borrow that money and pay it back over time, we could pay it back out of rental proceeds, which would come out of the district pocket, and there's no mechanism to take rental proceeds and give them back to the taxpayer, is there? In other words, is there no way to make the taxpayers whole if we take this 221,000 from them?
There we go. Thanks, buddy. So that, I guess, to answer your question, anytime we use the rental fund proceeds, even for projects like this, you're saving the taxpayer, because the amount that we're gonna be using on this project, at the end of the day, which comes from, partly from rental proceeds and partly from other one-time sources, that amount is 70% of the total, and does serve to reduce what otherwise would have been an impact to the taxpayer. So, and even if we limit that amount to the rental proceeds to facility upgrades, it doesn't mean we have to, or you have to, rather. It's just what we've recommended for use of rental proceeds, so that they could be used for other purposes. And what they could be used for is to offset expenses which would otherwise occur in the general fund. No, I guess hopefully that answers your question.
If I'm following what you're asking, Trustee Lorenzen, it sounds like the question is, do we take in enough in rental funds, and will we over the coming years, that rental funds could in fact pay for this if we used the loan option, so that our rental to MIS, to the new Cold Springs, anybody that would move into Mount Jumbo potentially over time, or as well as the rental funds that we have in savings. So we could potentially get this done without a levy if we went that route. I think that's the question, and is that true?
It is from an elementary standpoint. So if we basically push the burden into the elementary side, then you would, because we don't have a ready rental source in the high school. So the admin building lease, the Cold Springs lease will both be elementary leases. It doesn't mean that it couldn't be done that way. And certainly the multi-district agreements, which we'll talk about later, have the potential to do it in that fashion if the board wants to go that route. But it wouldn't have sort of both districts contributing.
Any other questions? Trustee Smith?
Thanks. And I guess I just want to, not to beat a dead horse, but make sure I understand. The first time when we approved the first 5 million or whatever it was, that included a lot of money that had come from previous rental agreements and sales of Roosevelt and stuff. So basically what we had done over time is we had built up that fund up to the $6 million that it was at. Then we had the big discussion where, excuse me, we decided to use that for this purpose. And then that then lowered it, excuse me, to the point that it's at now with the whatever's left in it. So if we don't use the loan, which would charge interest, which everyone, taxpayers essentially will end up paying one way or the other. But then this allows us, by not doing the loan, allows us to take whatever we would normally be paying for the next 15 years, gets back into that fund so that it then increases over time, which might put us back in a position where if something else happens, it basically save up in that fund, use it as we did. Because I think the part of the discussion last time was we're not leaving enough in that fund and it's too empty or not enough in it. So I think if we look at at using that, then we're not trying to build it back up, which is what we did talk about doing over time. So I guess I just want to point that out, that I liked the way that it worked in the past, having the $6 million there over time building it up. So not putting it in doesn't do anything to help that. And the 3.3% interest gets paid, whereas we don't pay that if we do the levy, is that right?
No, that's right, and I think it is possible under the statute to use the levy to pay the loan. I mean, and not to add another element to the equation, but there is, it is an option under the statute is that you could incur the debt essentially through an intercap loan and then levy on an annual basis to pay down that debt. So that was, I think, brought up as a possibility. The 100, just to clarify, the 101,000 is what's left over, not from the one-time only funds, but from the permissive levy funds that had been set aside and not needed to complete the roof and shakes project, the building project. So the total amount of one-time only funds that will be expended and that will be set aside and expended is about 5.2 million, 5,247,000.
And the 1.6 million in the elementary and the 1.1 million, those are what's still left in that fund, our building reserve fund, right?
That's what's left in the, what I describe as soft money sources. So just to give you an example of what that might look like, these are funds that that we've, for the most part of, they're one-time only, but some of them can accumulate and have accumulated. So in the elementary, you have indirect costs, which is a reimbursement for business-related services associated with operating federal programs and grants. You have Medicaid billing, which is a reimbursement for Medicaid services we provide. You have a multi-district cooperative agreements put in place, and the state kicked in some funds for that. There's just some other kind of oddball ones. There's a Microsoft settlement from years ago, and then the building, and that doesn't include the building reserve carryover. So that's still in the $500,000 range on the elementary side. The high school has stadium concessions, the cell tower lease. So there is a lease, so there is a high school lease. And I think that one is about $6,000 or $7,000 a year for leasing the space at the stadium. So there is that lease. There's also the MAC billing that exists. There's leftover from the beverage contract. I mean, we've held on to some of these funds as rainy day funds for quite a while, sort of as a savings account. That's what makes up the 1.6 and the 1.4.
I'm sorry, I mean, I know that this should be old hat by now, but, so a $221,000 permissive levy in the high school district, that means that for just 1 year, voters will see a slight increase to what, no.
No.
No, thank you, this.
Yeah, so they wouldn't see an increase because they've already been levied that amount this year. So they've actually been levied 390,000. So that if we levied 221 and no more, then it would be still a reduction from the amount that was levied this year. So, and by March 31st, we need to come to the board and identify what we're recommending as the permissive levy out of the building reserve fund. And that's a conversation we'll have with the board at that time, and Burley would identify major maintenance projects that he would like to have handled or funded with this building reserve permissive levy. So that right now the elementary has, the elementary permissive levy is 572,000, of which 80,000 comes from the state. So that last year is the first year that the state kicked in to districts that have one of these major maintenance levies. And the amount they kick in is based upon relative tax valuation. And the high school, we got 35,000, and the levy there was $390,000. So the benefit of both those levies is part of it was funded by the state. So of the 580 in the high school, 80 was, or in the elementary, 80 was from the state, the rest from the local taxpayer, and of the 390 in the high school, 35 was from the state. And I would expect that to continue. And tonight, I'm really not asking and the board doesn't need to decide what the permissive levy looks like, but I know that compared to last year, we're below what we levied last year. So 221 will be less than what we levied last year, if we just levied for that building, for that improvement over there.
But if we levy this money and then Burley comes in and wants more money, we'll just levy more money, right? We're not capping the levy at this time. So there's a chance that when we set it, it could be even higher than the 221 plus that we're already levying. Is that correct?
It likely will not increase from last year because the amount of the levy is capped based upon student enrollment. So our enrollment went down, so that it'll likely go down because it's based upon prior year A and B, and our A and B has been trickling down. So that the way the funding works is not so much the funding, but the calculation is $15,000 per district plus $100 per A and B from the prior budget report. So the amount in the cap in the elementary could go up, the cap in the high school could go down. And I think, my recommendation to look at the high school permissive levy rather than the elementary was really based upon the fact that the elementary will likely have more projects than the high school. And the reason for that is that the elementary bond budget is tighter. There were certain roofs that we are hoping to have residual bond funds to handle, which we won't. So it's possible Burley would come back and say Rattlesnake Roof, Jefferson Boiler, and some of those projects. The high school, that's not, it's in I guess, a better position from a bond proceed standpoint.
Oh, sorry.
We'll come back to you, but
Can I ask a really quick question?
Oh,
That's okay. I just assume not talking in the microphone anyway. My understanding of this permissive levy, as the way it was arranged by the legislature, is that we get this opportunity once a year, and we don't get that opportunity again until the next year. So if Burley came in and said he needed more money after we pass this permissive levy for if we pass it for $221,000, we couldn't bring another levy forward until next year at this time. No, but I mean, what I'm saying is you can't come in and say you want to do another permissive levy this year.
That's,
Under the guidelines that was set up for.
no, and you're right. Oh, that's right. And Diane's right too, because the time where we would come to you is in March, when we would say, here's our list of facility projects that we'd like funded with this 1 year funding source, knowing that 221 would already be set aside for this project. And I can't say to you tonight what else Burley has in mind, but I'm not sure that within the high school he has much in mind. But I can't say that this would be the max we.
I have a follow-up, please. So I guess what I'm really trying to ask is whether or not, if Burley comes in between now and before we have to do this at the end of March, and says, I need another $100,000, then that would be the way we base our permissive levy on. Is that not right? So, but then we couldn't do any more if we needed less, then that we would base our permissive levy on whatever amount that comes in before the end of March. And we cannot do that particular permissive levy until next year at this time.
That's right, and the thing about it in March, though, just to clarify, is it's an estimate in March. And so it's possible between March and August, when you set your budgets, that amount adjusts slightly. So it's not, it's, you're setting up placeholders with estimated costs in March when you do your work in determining or fine tuning those estimated construction costs. For instance, the actual levy that you asked the board in August to approve might be more, but it has to be within those caps that are enrollment based. You're,
I'm trying to get away just.
we're not setting a cap tonight, no. In March, it will likely be a cap in March, yeah.
What you were just talking about is getting at my question, which is, are there potentially projects that we would forego because we're earmarking these funds for the admin building project versus projects that might need to be done that Burley identifies? And I know Burley's not here, but is it possible that we would have to forego projects that he would identify need to be completed? And I guess in conjunction with that, I'm trying to figure out just if this loan option is a better option than what's being proposed, and wrap my head around the interest part of it and what Trustee Lorenzen was saying. Because I guess the way that I've always looked at interest is it's kind of like you're flushing money down a toilet. And so if you have the money up front to pay for it, that would be the better way. But unless I'm missing something in part of this conversation, if you can help me with that.
So the first question, I would say it's possible in terms of are we leapfrogging this project over something else. However, at this point in time, that is the priority project, is the budget necessary to complete that project. So there are other projects on the priority list, including the Sealy piping project that we want to tackle. This one has more immediate need for funding because we're right in the middle of construction. And we're still waiting to hear on that grant that we submitted to the Department of Commerce on the piping project up in Sealy. So that one comes to my immediate mind as a priority project for the district on the high school side of the equation. And in terms of the loan to finance a construction or to finance a purchase, we have an opportunity to use other avenues to fund this project, which is why I'm recommending other avenues than to incur a debt. The concept of repaying a loan with rental proceeds is good. I mean, and I think if the high school had a more reliable source of rental proceeds, then it would be a good option, because you can leverage sort of future payments and with a large infusion of cash. And when Mark and I were looking at this project, and when the architects were talking about 10 and 12 million for that project, part of what our contemplation was using rental proceeds to repay loans if we needed to get an intercap loan. So I think having narrowed the amount of this burden down to the 220, I think the better approach would be to use resources that we have or that we have at our disposal. Ann's right that permissive levy is on an annual basis. I'm expecting that it'll still be less. No matter what we come to you with, it's going to be less than what we levied this current year, even with this in place. And so there's not going to be an increase as a result of this, an increased levy or an increased tax burden. I look at it as those funds can be available again this year, and it's an amount that fortunately is less than what we had levied this year. And that project bleeding into this next fiscal year is really what allows us to tap into this resource, because that project at first was going to be done in August, and now it's more like October. And so we know from talking with Holtang that there's more construction costs that this FY21 revenue source could help fund.
Any other questions? I have some. So which dollar amounts in the proposal would be coming out of the elementary budget? The 101, so it would be the 3121 and the 13116? And the 10160 is unexpended funds that we already have. So the one question is whether or not to use, I forget what the BR stands for. Building reserve permissive levy. And right now, the levy's higher than this. And so in order to have the intercap loan, because we don't have a really good source of revenue on the high school side, it would really need to be the elementary side that would need to take out the loan, because they have, if we were going to follow the model that Trustee Lorenzen suggested, because they have a better source, and then it'd be possible that we could pay off the $61,000 through elementary side property rentals and things like that. But if we do the permissive levy, then we save the $61,000, and those funds can continue to go to other things instead?
Correct.
Okay.
And I think the calculation I did would contemplate a 15-year loan, 3.3%, and the annual obligation would be about $18,900 per year, and split between elementary and high school at 60-40. It's 10 and 8 or something along those lines. So the annual burden would be could be borne by rental proceeds in the elementary, but as said, I mean, these funds are available in the permissive levy.
Any other questions based on my questions? Trustee Lorenzen?
I feel like we're making arguments in the form of questions. Is there a early penalty, early payoff penalty on an intercap loan? Like if when the dust settles, we decide to pay it off, would we incur a penalty?
There's no prepayment penalty.
So just one question. If we took out the 221,051 coming from the high school, then any motion would have to substitute taking out a loan in that amount on the elementary side. Is that the alternate? Okay. Trustee McDonald?
So is there kind of a guesstimation of the difference between the two options as far as dollar-wise?
I would say that the only difference would be the interest paid. So the one would be covered over a 15-year term if you extend it out 15 years, because you can pay it off early. And that would be a $61,000 interest obligation that you would incur. And I think that, the other thing is that we're identifying a funding source that wouldn't be put at play until we're paying for construction obligations in the later part of the summer. So if the board wants to percolate on this, it's not like we need to know now. You've already approved that we're going to increase the budget by this amount to support that project. This is what I think is the best approach to fund it. I think, I feel good about having available permissive levy to reduce that burden. But it, as mentioned, this contemplates an FY21 building reserve permissive levy, so we'd meet again in March to talk about it, and again, well, by the summertime, we probably have to have it in place, but it is certainly possible to ruminate on it a little more.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I guess we'll take up the first item, which is A, which is to approve the elementary funding for increased construction budget for the administrative building remodel. And the recommendation from the administration is that we use the combination of interest earnings from the Roosevelt sale proceeds and interest on the rental proceeds, which adds up to $43,237 for the elementary side, the K-12 side of things, because those are elementary budget items. So I'll entertain any motion that anyone has. Trustee Smith? Me.
I move that we take the administration's recommendation.
Is there board discussion? Trustee Smith?
I guess I just want to say the reason I made that motion is because I think for several reasons, equality among the districts as far as balance that Pat has addressed here a little bit with the way that he's formulated this, the fact that it would be cheaper, up to $62,000 cheaper, $61,900, and I understand we could pay that off earlier. And based on the rest of the information that Pat gave us with the available funds, I think this seems to be the most fiscally responsible way to do it. I'd like to thank Pat for putting it together.
Is there any other board discussion? Trustee Deck?
I'd exactly echo what Trustee Smith said and say that answering all of our questions, including the ones that feel like 5 years in, we really should know the answers to those, is super helpful, and it's complicated. So recognizing that I think over time, this administration and this cabinet has shown itself to be pretty conservative about leaving enough behind to support unexpected needs, being kind of conservative in that regard. There's some trust there that lends me to think that the way that this is structured, with spending this much of what we can anticipate using this year in the levy on this project, if that seems like a responsible thing to do, I'm believing that. So.
Trustee.
I guess I just want to be clear, what we're approving is $43,000 from the elementary district, not the rest of the package. The rest of the package is the next motion.
I guess, I'm sorry, I did. Thank you. Yes, which is that my understanding would be that we might have made a motion that would have included something about what the elementary was taking out a loan to do, or if we were addressing that part now. So if the elementary side is not including that piece, then it does impact how we're addressing both parts of this, because we would have had to include something on the elementary side. Or am I wrong about that, or am I right?
Is there any other board discussion? Seeing none, then is there any public comment? Seeing no one racing to the podium again. So there's a seconded motion that the trustees vote on the motion that authorizes funding for the additional construction budget for the administrative building out of the elementary side funding in the total amount of $43,237, which has been identified by two funding sources that is found on page 2. All K-12 trustees in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. And that is, I think, unanimous as to all K-12. And then we move on to B, which is to approve the high school funding for the increased construction budget for the administrative building remodel. And the administration recommendation is that a combination of $101,600 and a new high school permissive levy in the amount of $221,51 would combine to $321,651 to cover the high school side of the budget for the administrative building. So I'll entertain any motion that anyone wants to make. Trustee Service? Whoops, sorry.
I'll make the motion to accept the administration recommendation.
It's seconded by Trustee Smith. Is there any board discussion? Trustee Lorenzen?
So I think one thing we need to remember, when we levy the high school district, we're still levying the elementary district. And this would get we say, well, over time, we would spend a little more money. But for the person paying the tax, they're paying about 15% of what they would pay each year. And we know those taxes don't get paid. They get pushed down to the renters. And 50% of the people in Missoula rent. And this is an opportunity for us to say, okay, we're just not gonna push this tax onto you people right now. And I don't feel confident that something else won't happen. I don't see interest as wasted. I see it as an insurance policy, any more than fire insurance is wasted or health insurance is wasted. If you don't die, is life insurance wasted? No. If we don't have some financial disaster, I still don't think this $350 a month is what it comes out to, even if we go out to the 15 years. I don't see that as wasted. I see that as us providing the same kind of conservative approach to our finances as we would in our own lives. And I think, yes, we can spread this over the high school district, but remembering that the elementary is a huge part of the high school, so it's still going to hit the in-town property owners and it's going to hit the in-town renters. And so I'm just saying, let's take this opportunity to reduce that hit and be ready in case something happens. A couple years from now, if all's cool and we have some extra money, we can just pay that loan off.
Thanks. Trustee Decker?
I'm just gonna chime in that I really hear that concern, and I appreciated this discussion in order to clarify for myself that we're not in fact imposing truly a new kind of tax on the taxpayers, that we are not setting a cap on what this is going to look like this year, and that this is the way in the state of Montana schools fund operations, which includes the projects that we've been charged with doing for our district, and that we've said we're going to do. We don't, the decision to go this route is not a decision to increase people's taxes. People are not going to necessarily see an increase to their tax bill from this.
Any other, Trustee Lorenzen?
However, if we didn't do it, they could see a decrease.
Trustee Smith?
I'd just like to say, I think that Trustee Decker is correct, that this is not, I mean, while it is true that they could be a decrease, I think we all know that there won't be, because we just listed some of the other priorities that we do have. We won't be able to get to all the priorities with the levies, with the premises levy that we do have. I'll also note that we no longer have building reserve fund in the elementary or in the secondary, and if we don't do this project over here correct the first time, that could be just inviting for bigger costs down the line. I'll take this opportunity to recommend or to just note that we don't have those levies, and I would like to have those. Talk about your insurance policies. This is what we need so that we don't have to do another $150 million bond to address all these things in the future. If we're truly going to look out for the taxpayer, we're going to take care of the infrastructure that we have by doing it right the first time and maintaining it as we go along. That's why I'm going to vote for this.
Any other board discussion? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none. Then all trustees in favor of the motion to authorize the funding for the additional construction budget for the administrative building as recommended, which would be in the total dollar amount of $322,651. Please indicate by raising your hand. And that is Trustee Smith, Trustee Sturbis, Trustee Oldperson, not Trustee McDonald. It went up and down. Up? Okay, Trustee McDonald, Trustee Holland, Trustee Decker, Trustee Newbold, Trustee Wake. All those opposed? Trustee Lorenzen. So the motion passes. And thank you for that discussion. Now we move on to 9A1, which is to approve the budget amendment resolution on the elementary side. It's Resolution 2020-5E.
Okay, so the, so this is sort of the step 3 in the process of the budget amendment. The board approved the budget amendment proclamation. That proclamation also included a petition that was submitted to the county superintendent's office. The county sup approved the petition, and that approval is, I believe, in the packet, I believe, yeah, on page 25. And so this step in the process is we notified the public through posting and in the paper and at buildings the time and date of this meeting to discuss the amendment. This is really a nice opportunity from the standpoint that we have the opportunity for a budget amendment of $1.2 million. We're asking for $854,540, which is funded by direct state aid in part, and then by the TIF remittance in the other part. So the TIF remittance amounts to $410,930. If not for this budget amendment, those funds would essentially stay in general fund reserves, so we can pull that in to the general fund budget and utilize it for elementary purposes. The 443 is direct state aid, so both of these funding sources are available without digging deep into our reserves, so that's a positive. The resolution you'll see is on page 24. On page 24, what I want to point out on page 24 at the bottom, per sort of the form resolution, I've identified some budget codes, and these budget codes won't have much meaning to you, so I want to explain what they entail. And so the purpose of these budget codes is to identify possible places where we'll expend the budget amendment. The first line, the 101, references the general fund in the elementary. Obviously 1,000 is a regular program, and then you have 112, 117, which are salary line items. 112 for certified staff, 117 for para staff, and then 180 would be a severance component, and then 610 would be supplies. The next line item, the 640, would be teaching and learning materials. Below that, 441 and 660, I'm just talking about the far right object codes. Those are O&M maintenance and equipment codes. Below that is a admin remodel code. So this one is if the board was to consider using budget amendment for the purposes of the remodel. The line below that is for transportation, to and from transportation, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Then below that is the multi-district agreement. Multi-district agreement is between the elementary and the high school. It allows funds to be deposited by either district into that interlocal fund to be used in a flexible way to support services and obligations. And then finally, the instructional or instrument repair and purchase, sort of a fine arts placeholder. These budget codes are placeholders. It doesn't mean any specific amount would be expended there. They're sort of broadly defined. If they're not expended there, then the funds that aren't expended will roll into the year-end available funds. And those year-end funds have historically been used for teaching and learning materials, or to restore other budget expenditures, or potentially to deposit to multi-district agreement to help with the board budget in the future. In this specific instance, a large chunk of the funds coming in are part of the TIF remittance. We've obligated ourselves to pay for seatbelts upgrades to beach transportation. So the one item I know I'll recommend to the board that we do is that we deposit a portion, or the amount that's due to beach for the seatbelt upgrades, to the multi-district agreement from this budget amendment, so we can pay off that obligation when it comes due in September. We have time to talk about it. I'm just giving you a heads up that that's why it's here, and it's why it's a good opportunity. It's how we can translate the TIF remittance to paying off that seatbelt burden without running it through the transportation fund and that levy. So that's definitely a positive for the board, but also for the taxpayers, that can happen in that way. Otherwise, that's all I have to report about that.
Any questions for Pat? Seeing none, Then the recommendation is that, it's an elementary action item, is that the trustees approve the attached elementary budget amendment resolution 2020-5E for a budget amendment in the amount of $854,540. Is there such a motion to do so? Moved by trustee Newbold and seconded by trustee Decker. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none, all K-12 trustees in favor of the motion to approve the attached elementary budget amendment resolution 2020-5E in the amount of $854,540, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all K-12 trustees present. Then we start bumping into items that have to do with the elections coming up and what would be on the ballots. So do you want to talk about 2 and 3 kind of generally, even the ones, I think everyone can vote on the elementary trustees, because, and then everyone can vote on each of the same.
These are annual items, a resolution that calls for the school election, the trustee election. There's 2 seats open on the elementary, and there's 1 on the high school. All I'll point out is that the candidate deadline for filing is March 26th. We're doing these resolutions now. They're actually due by the 28th of February, but there's no harm in doing them sooner. The write-in deadline is April 2nd, and then the date to cancel this election is April 3rd. So there's a potential for a special board meeting. Well, not so much here. If you look at the resolution, what it authorizes is that it's later determined that any portion of the election is not required. The board authorizes the SOUP or the SOUP's designee to direct the cancellation of the election. So that could come into play if we have a number of no candidates at file. So same comments would apply to the next item.
Any questions? Seeing none, then item number 2 is, the recommendation is to approve resolution 2020-6E, which is calling for an election for school trustees, the 2 positions that would be open, and the trustee election would be held on May 5th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve the resolution 2020-6E? Moved by trustee Lorenzen. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Oldperson. Is there any board discussion? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving resolution 2020-6E, please indicate by raising your hand. I think everyone can vote on this because it's the high school positions. Is that correct?
First one's elementary, sorry.
Okay, but they serve at the high school level too. Okay, so we'll just, yeah, but we'll be safe. Okay, so all K-12 trustees in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand, and that's unanimous as to K-12 trustees. And the next one is a recommendation to approve resolution 2020-4S, which is for the high school trustee position in District D. Is there a motion? There's a motion by trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Lorenzen. Is there any board discussion? Any public comment? See none, all trustees in favor of approving resolution 2020-4S, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we come to, I think we can discuss 4 and 5 together, although they're separate votes. One is elementary general fund levy, and the other one is a high school general fund levy.
So the resolution is a placeholder for us to ask our voters for approval of an operating levy. It doesn't mean we're setting the operating levy or that we would, that we're necessarily going to, or the board is necessarily going to proceed with an operating levy, but the resolution is required if that's going to be a possibility. So we have it here for both the elementary and high school. High school is a placeholder. Like the trustee election, it can be canceled by April 3rd. We have to set the levy amount, or would want to, by March 31st. And there's a board meeting on that night. And February enrollment count was last week, so the amount of the levy in the elementary could be up to 372,000 and up to 60,000 in the high school. That's not to say that that would be a recommendation of administration at this point.
Any questions? Seeing none, then we'll take the first one first, which is a recommendation to approve Resolution 2020-7E, which is the Elementary General Fund levy and calling for a school election for that levy. Is there such a motion? Moved by Trustee Smith. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Oldperson. Is there any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all K-12 trustees in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 2020-7E, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all K-12 trustees present. And then we come to the parallel topic, and the recommendation is to approve Resolution 2020-5S, which is to call for a school election for the high school general fund levy. Is there a motion to do so? Moved by Trustee Wake. Is there a second? Second by Trustee Lorenzen. Is there any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 2020-5S, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And again, it looks like we can talk more generally about 6A and B, but it looks like we have to give permission from the elementary side to enter into the district, or the multi-district agreement, then we have to give authority to the high school side. Okay.
So the current multi-district agreement expires at the end of June this year. So given the conversation about the budget amendment, the possible uses and the funding of the multi-district, I'm bringing this to the board to approve the continuation of the multi-district agreement for an additional 3 years. That agreement is attached on page 30. This provides for the cooperative funding of services, activities, and undertaking, and the example I gave was the obligation for the seatbelt upgrades. So I could see that as being an excellent use of these multi-district funds deposited from the elementary.
Any questions? Sure.
I don't remember when we talked about this, maybe it was such agenda setting, but I guess I just thought this was like a flow, it ebbed and flowed, but in fact, money is deposited into a separate fund called the Interlocal Cooperative Fund, correct? And then it's dispersed from there?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then we'll take the first item, which is, let's see, that there is a motion to approve the multi-district agreement between the elementary and high school districts in the form that's attached that would go from the elementary side to the high school side. So is there a motion from a K-12 trustee to do so? Moved by Trustee Lorenzen. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Smith. Is there any board discussion or comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, then all K-12 trustees in favor of the motion to approve the multi-district agreement between the elementary and the high school districts, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous. Oh, there she is. Unanimous as to all trustees present. I was thinking you might still be in the hall. And now we go to B, which is to approve the multi-district agreement between the elementary and high school districts, which is the action taken by the high school side. And so is there a motion to approve the multi-district agreement between the elementary and the high school districts? Moved by Trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee Sturvis. Is there any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of the motion to approve the multi-district agreement between the elementary and high school districts, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to 7, which is to approve kind of a pretty tiny easement, or not a very big easement, but it looks like it's you, Pat, that will be explaining what's going on.
Yeah, thanks. So this easement is necessary for us to get our final certificate of occupancy for Willard. The easement was contemplated in the original permitting. It's necessary because there wasn't available right-of-way space for the sidewalk easement. There's a bus loop there, and so the plan, which is carried through here, was to use some district property, and so an easement's necessary for this, for that right-of-way or that sidewalk to be placed on our property, which it already exists. I mean, Sletton put that in there, so this is just a step in the process of getting our certificate of occupancy. So I talked with Aaron Nostrand at Holtang, and completely expected, so.
Any questions for Pat? Trustee Smith?
This is more curiosity than anything else, but when the city built the sidewalk, or did we build it as part of our bond project?
So Sletton installed it, so Sletton built it, our contractor.
Okay, so we pay impact fees to the city, then we build on our property, and then we give our property to the city.
I think you got her.
Is that a question?
So can I ask a follow-up? But it's an easement. I mean, we still maintain ownership. It's just that they have the right to also use it, right?
Correct, and so
Okay.
then the obligations for sidewalk ownership is what we're committing to in the easement too.
Is there a transfer of liability from us to the city if we give them this easement? Like, if someone falls in that sidewalk, is that on them?
No, I think it's going to be exactly as with our other sidewalks. I know, sorry.
Any other questions based on those? Nice ringtone. And so I think Willard's now high school property, right? We worked that out, okay. So the recommendation is to approve the attached easement and execution of the same, and I guess all the paperwork would then be filed through the business office, okay? So is there a motion to approve the attached easement? Moved by trustee Wake, is there a second? Seconded by trustee Sturbis. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of approving the attached easement that is described in writing in the attachments, please indicate by raising your hand. That is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we end up with a, pardon? I have no idea what just happened. So now there is a recommendation to approve a transportation route mileage change, and I don't know who's going to speak on behalf of Burley since he's homesick tonight. So Pat?
Unfortunately for you, it's me again. So this is routine approval requirements for us to get our reimbursements, the local and state reimbursements. So the routes are attached, and that's what we're asking the board to approve.
Any questions? Seeing none, the recommendation is, and they're bus routes that affect both elementary and high school kids? Okay. So the recommendation is that the trustees approve the bus route mileage changes for 2019-2020 that are attached on page 36 in a summary. Is there a motion to do so? Moved by trustee Sturbis and seconded by trustee Wake. Is there any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of approving the bus route mileage changes for 2019-2020 school year, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. We come to the personnel report. Dave, is there anything you'd want to point out on this report? Any questions for Dave? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the items on the personnel report? Moved by trustee Lorenzen, seconded by trustee Wake. We normally don't discuss specific individuals listed, but we can have a general discussion as a board. Any board comment? Seeing none, same limitation on comments. Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of approving the items on the personnel report provided beginning on page 38, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. And then we move on to B2, which is the district organizational chart. Tonight, this is information only. At some point in the future, it may, I'm expecting it will come forward as an action item, but I'll let Superintendent Watson walk us through the possible suggestion.
Thank you for allowing just a few minutes this evening. Dave, I wonder if you could pull that closer a little bit. It's a little hard to see. Sorry about that. Maybe I'm just getting old. Yeah. Good company. Maybe. Yeah, I will. Yeah, but then it says the current window is too small, but I'll work on it. So I bring this to you this evening for a couple of reasons, and we'll start with this one since it's up on the board. So you don't have to read all these because we talked about them before, but these are our 16 imperatives that I brought to the board, and it was over 2 meetings, and you'll probably recall that in one of the meetings I asked you to vote with stars, and remember the little sticker stars, and you had to vote on your top 3. Grace, I think you missed the second meeting, so sorry. So I want you to know I did the same activity with our principals, and then I have some advisory councils. I have a teacher advisory council, classified advisory council, union board of directors. Anyway, what I wanted to show you are the totals. So there were 16 of these, and there were 5 that came out. There were 5 that came out on the top in terms of votes. Number 1 that came out pretty high among folks, professional learning model. Remember, that was related to the lack of substitute teachers that we have in the district, and perhaps maybe redesigning how we do professional development so that we're not pulling teachers out of the classroom. So that one was high vote getter. Another one that came out high, general fund budget analysis. So as you're well aware, we have very little discretionary money in our general fund. A lot of it goes to personnel and non-negotiables like utilities, but we do have some discretionary money in our general fund budget, and I think it's a good time to take a look at what discretion we have and how we're spending that money. So that one came out, got a lot of votes as well. Another one that got some votes, the 5th highest vote getter was the dual language immersion program, building a K-12 plan. But that, relatively speaking, it got 21 versus 20, which is that policies one. But I wanted to highlight just a couple of others. The crisis response safety plan got 25 votes out of everybody, and so that one was also one of high interest. And then the one we're going to talk about this evening that got the 2nd highest votes, got 50 votes, was the district organizational structure. So that's one of the reasons I'm bringing it to you this evening, because I think, as you can see from the groups that I've spoken to so far, not only the board, but some of the other employee groups, that this is an issue that they think we need to spend some time discussing and taking a look at. So the second reason I'm bringing this to the board, it's actually in board policy 6130, and I think I referenced this in your packet, but policy 6130 does say, subject to the approval of the trustees, the superintendent has the authority to reorganize or arrange specific responsibilities in supervisory personnel in a manner that will provide for the effective operation of the district. So it is appropriate to have this discussion at the board level as we're discussing reorganization or possible reorganization. As Marcia said, this is an information only item. I would welcome your comments and questions as we go through these. I do have some other groups to continue to talk to between now and the point when I would bring it back to you. So I've been showing these charts and the various version of these charts to a variety of different groups, and I'll continue to do so and get some feedback. I want to start with our current structure, which is on page 44 of your packet. So you will obviously be able to see that better than what I have up here. But I'll just use this for the, so I can kind of just point out what I'm talking about when I'm talking about these different pieces. So what you see here is our current structure, and I don't recognize every single position on here, but what I have recognized on this chart is our, what we call our executive positions, or executive cabinet positions. And so those are across the top here. And what I wanted to point out, just a couple of things. This particular chart, when you look at organizational charts from other organizations, school districts, this is what I call a pretty flat chart, kind of a pancake chart in which, you know, all the folks report to one person, and that's definitely a way to do things, but there has been some confusion and frustration and communication issues with this. So without going into a whole lot of detail, what happens is when you've got this many people reporting to one person, then sometimes decisions can take a long time, decisions can get stalled. There can be times when people say, well, I thought that was somebody else's decision. And so it has been a little concerning just in the efficiency of this model. I feel just in my role as superintendent that this model is not very efficient. And then the other thing just a subtle thing that I want to point out, you all used to be organized with 3 regional directors, and the schools were split up between the 3 regional directors, and then there was a change made a few years ago when we went to teaching and learning, and that's created 2 regional directors and a lot of responsibilities. In addition to supervising those schools, there's lots of other jobs that are connected to those regional directors. So that's created some concern just with the amount of responsibility. And then there's other positions that are not referenced on here. I referenced a few others, you know, like Adult Education Center reports to Teaching and Learning. Our Fine Arts Coordinator reports to Julie as the Executive Director, Region 1, and then our Special Ed Coordinators report to Karen. So this is this is what we're currently operating under, and I've had lots of conversations with the Cabinet about the pros and cons of this chart. Again, there's no perfect chart, but there has been some, just some general communication issues related to this chart. So I'm going to move on to the next one, version 1, which is on page 45. So a couple of caveats with this. What I tried to do was keep us within the same budget and not increase the number of administrators. I know it looks like there's more boxes, but actually what I've done is just rearranged the boxes for the most part. There is one additional box, and that's special education. So as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, we're looking at hiring a special education director. So you'll see that in both versions of the chart. But what you see here is what I've cut down is the number of folks at that executive level. So there's only 3 positions at that second tier, and then what I've done is rearrange some of the responsibilities to a 3rd tier. So this helps a little bit with communication because there's more folks helping to make some of the decisions and hopefully provide some more immediate response to some of the folks that are looking for decisions. So that's one thing I like about this chart. The other thing, what we've done is we've taken all the responsibilities, many of the responsibilities that currently fall under Julie and Karen's position, and we've sort of split them out among other people. Like a federal programs coordinator would be working with our Title I program and our Title VII program, which I referenced earlier, the Indian Ed Department. So there's lots of federal programs we have in the district, and having somebody dedicated to that position would be helpful. One thing I want to point out here, all the principals and all the schools would report to the assistant superintendent, with the exception of things like Jefferson. Jefferson is our preschool, likely report to our special ed director. So that's just some subtleties of that particular chart. I think I'll show you the next chart, and then if you have questions, I can always come back. The next iteration is a chart that has 2 assistant superintendents. The reason I put this one together is just a concern that I heard from Cabinet about, you know, too much responsibilities falling under one assistant superintendent. So this one splits it between a K-5 assistant superintendent and a 612. I have also thought about an idea of going a K-8 and a 9-12, if that makes more sense to split it that way. So that's another possibility. I'm not showing that here, but again, this is just a draft. The interesting thing about this one, in order to get that second assistant superintendent, I had to combine some positions. So you'll see the curriculum and the federal programs positions were combined on this chart. Still have a SPED director. This kind of looks a little funky with the box between all four, but what I'm referencing here is that SPED director is actually going to work with both assistant superintendents, because special education crosses over our district K-5 or K-12. Same thing with curriculum director. That person would work with both assistant superintendents because that crosses over our district K-12. You'll notice on both of these charts, you'll see a position called activities director. That's something that I think would be valuable to add in the future, but I'm not able to do that now and stay within budget. So I just referenced that for a possible future discussion if we were to add anything to the org chart. The fine arts director or fine arts coordinator currently reports to Julie as a regional director. Under this model, I have that person reporting to HR. There's been a lot of questions around this. I'm not recommending that HR become the home for fine arts. That's not what I'm recommending. What I'm saying is that everybody on this chart sort of needs a supervisor or needs a boss that can support them and answer questions. And so the reason I put fine arts over there is just to kind of pull some things off the plate of the assistant superintendent. So I think I will stop there and would welcome your feedback or comments or thoughts around any of these charts.
Whoops, trustee Lorenzen and then trustee Smith.
I think it would be helpful if you kind of show that the teachers union reports to where they do, and then the classified union, because that's a huge group that we don't see there.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. So I'll just use this chart. Currently, both unions work very closely with Dave under HR, and so he works with both union presidents. They don't necessarily report to him, that he doesn't supervise them, but he works very closely with them on various issues. And then the other thing that I created this year was my advisory councils, and both unions are represented on my advisory councils. I have a teacher advisory council and a classified advisory council. That's more of an informal way for folks to give me feedback, and so I feel like that's available, but probably not referenced on the chart.
Trustee.
I'm not sure how this is impacted by this, but I certainly appreciate your efforts to simplify and to address the things that we brought up or we voted on. And I'm really glad that you addressed that fine arts thing. That was my biggest question. I hope that it's not the result, or the result isn't that whoever our fine arts director ends up being. I hope there's a dotted line over toward the teaching side, and I think in your cabinet, certainly from what I've seen so far, I have no fear that won't be the case, but I don't want people to get locked over kind of away from the traditional, because I mean fine arts is certainly teaching and learning components to me. My other question is a little bit about, you're kind of showing us the different responsibilities and kind of who's going to report to who. I like that. I like the fact that it's a little clearer who does what, and I like the fact that it's a little bit more spread out. My question is, does that affect salaries? I mean, if we shuffle people, or is that putting the cart before the horse to talk about that?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. I just would like to say too, I forgot to mention this early on, what I've tried to do with these charts is just consider the charts as what seems more effective or more efficient without necessarily attaching any personnel to the boxes. But I understand too that's what we have to do at some point. What I would tell you is that, yes, both of these iterations could impact salaries, and so that's important. That'll be an important piece once we get to that point. But what I'd like to do first with just so the board understands, is just sort of agree on a chart and then work through those details after that.
I remember that when the executive regional director system was developed in the district, one of the goals was to attain a better sense of alignment among schools that would feed in to middle schools and feed into high schools. There was a hope that by having those schools connected kind of administratively in some way, that would be part of that sort of K-12 progression that people would experience. And of course, there's been a lot of conversation around that with special programs and how does that fit into the whole picture. And I'm curious as to, between these two models, your sense of how that question relates to these two different structures and separating out who's supervising elementary versus the older, and what the challenges, but maybe also the opportunities.
Yeah, it's a interesting discussion, and I wasn't here when that model was created, so I don't want to assume that that I understood the model completely. What I would tell you is that it would be nice to have those feeder patterns, but unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, we have quite a few students from outside of our school district that feed into our high schools, which does create, non-perfect feeder patterns. The other issue is we've got, schools, for example, like CS Porter, that sends students to 3 different high schools. So some of that would have to be cleaned up if you really wanted a true feeder pattern. But the sort of the big rock in the pond, if you will, would be, for example, Big Sky High School accepts, probably 70% of the students there are from outside of our district. So it would be difficult to clean up that feeder pattern to send all, one middle school to one high school. I don't think that would work. However, having said that, I do understand the model and the desire to have, like a few elementaries, one middle school, one high school, all under one person supervising them. That makes a lot of sense. But you would never be able to clean up the feeder patterns. I think that was the way the model was structured, is to have a few elementaries, one middle school, one high school under one person. What happened is when we went to 2 regional directors, then that, that went away, that perfect model, that triangle model. What I would tell you too, though, using both of these charts, so what I like about this particular chart is you have an assistant superintendent that is in charge of the whole K-12 program, which provides consistency. On the other chart, you've got a K-5 and a 6-12, which those 2 people would have to work together really closely to provide that K-12 consistency.
Any other trustee?
Can you explain a little bit more about the thought process with the communications line?
Yes, so the communications position, an important position. The reason that you typically see it, no matter what chart we looked at, so we looked at a lot of different charts across the state. Communications is usually sort of hanging out there, and part of the reason is because they don't necessarily have any programs underneath them that they directly supervise, but they do play an important role in the cabinet, and they have to report directly to the superintendent because it becomes a lot of messaging and for families and for the community. So that's an important position that reports directly to me. But because they don't necessarily have any programs underneath them, that's why they're kind of hanging out there on the side.
Trustee Service?
So I'm just kind of curious, how did the current cabinet, how can they apply for certain positions? I mean, how does that work out?
Yeah, so once we decide on a chart, we'll work out that process. And so any positions that are new to the chart would be positions that we would have a process for. My thought would be an internal process first, and then if we're unable to fill from internal process, then we'd go external. But those would be for positions that are new to the chart.
Any other questions?
So if we used it internal, you go in internal and let that be open to them, in the long run, we'll still have to bring in outside to replace the internal?
Possibly. I think the only position right now that's sort of being advertised externally was the SPED position, the Special Education Director. I don't know if we'll have other positions that we'll have to advertise externally. I think I'd want to go through the internal process first to see what we have.
I guess it's more of a comment and question. I'll share that when I looked at version 1 and I saw the responsibilities under the single assistant superintendent, my impression was that's a lot. And so I'm wondering if you can share the thought process on, did you receive feedback on this model that caused version 2, or were you developing version 1 and version 2 simultaneously? And then can you share a little bit about the feedback that you've gotten on each versions, just so that we can be mulling it over as we progress?
Yeah, so great questions. There have been several iterations of these charts that we've worked through together at Cabinet. I finally got to the point where, we're basically had just the 2 versions. I presented the version 1 first and heard from Cabinet, just some concerns about the amount of responsibility for one assistant superintendent. And so I created version 2 to sort of respond to that, but at the same time understanding that we couldn't afford all the positions. So I had to combine some positions in order to get to version 2. That definitely came from comments that I received from Cabinet. I've shown both versions to various employee groups. I have one more employee group tomorrow that I'll show this to, my teacher advisory council. I've heard pros and cons for both charts. I haven't heard a overwhelming, yay or nay on either chart. I've heard pros and cons. I think I mentioned a couple of these. So one of the cons that people have talked about with version 2 is having our district split, K-5, 6, 12. What does that do for consistency across our system, K-12? The pro that I heard for version 2 is, an assistant superintendent at K-5 could really focus more on the needs of K-5 schools and provide more direct support for the K-5 principals. So there's definitely pros and cons. And as I said before, there's no perfect chart, but I've gotten pros and cons for both. And I really am committed to getting feedback, as much feedback as I can before I make any final decisions.
So would the assistant superintendent or superintendents be required to be fully qualified superintendents? First question. And second, would anyone whose job requires them to be a certified teacher be supervised by a certified teacher?
Great question. So the assistant superintendent position does not require a superintendent certification. It does require an administrative license in the state of Montana, because in order to supervise anyone that's certified, you need an administrative license.
Okay, I kind of have a couple together. So if we were looking at, like, for instance, the assistant superintendent K-5, K through 5, and then the assistant for 6 through 12, are we going to have to provide offices, extra offices for them? And kind of, if we had an assistant on both of those levels, is that person, are those 2 people going to just, their job description just going to be being the superintendent, or is that going to keep them busy all day long, or are they going to fill in others as a teacher to what,
Yeah, so I think if I understand your question correctly, would we need additional space, for example, in our new administrative building if we had 2 assistant superintendents? And we currently have 2 regional directors, and so we're able to make space work that way. When we looked at the office plan for the new administrative building, we had office space for 2 people if need be. So I don't think the office space will be an issue. The second part of your question is, I think, what other responsibilities might fall on these 2 people? And there's quite a bit that falls on an assistant superintendent. So if you think about all the partnerships that we currently have, a great example is, Trustee Decker works really closely with the 0 to 5 initiative. That's a partnership that's valuable to our district, and it deserves somebody within the district that can support that partnership, and so that would naturally fall to a K-5 assistant superintendent, which would make a lot of sense. But I could probably list, given a chance, 12 different partnerships that we have in the community that really deserve a person that is connected to the district that can work directly with that partnership. So these 2 folks will have plenty to do. And I think probably the next iteration that I would bring to you, I would try to, detail exactly what some of the responsibilities are under those positions.
So then we would be looking at 2 new positions.
Any other questions? I just have one. You said you looked at other models. What do the other AAs do? I mean, what are their models in the state? I don't know if.
Yeah, it's all over the map.
Does anyone have the flat pancake?
Billings is pretty close to the flat pancake, but it does have a few lower tiers, but Billings is probably the closest one to ours. I think Helena, Kalispell, Bozeman, they all are more this traditional model with multiple tiers.
Guess just a follow-up, do most of the AAs just have a single assistant superintendent, or do some of them have 2?
Yeah, so the Great Falls, Billings, and I would throw us in that mix because we have 2 regional directors. So Great Falls, Billings, and Missoula all have 2 assistant superintendents. Kalispell, Helena, and Bozeman just have 1. Before I left Bozeman, we were looking at adding a second assistant superintendent. I can't get Butte's. I can't. I can't get. You can't find Butte's chart anymore. So.
Okay. Good. Everyone's catching little details tonight. Way to go. So it sounds like maybe the best idea is if anyone has more specific comments, rather than for us to start micromanaging and say, let's move this box here, move this box there, have a conversation with you. If anyone thinks they have a productive suggestion about leading one way or the other.
You bet.
Yeah. So does that work with everybody? So, Superintendent Watson's door is open for any suggestions on all this, because I'm sure if we get into the weeds, we could have a really long discussion. We've got 2 more items to discuss tonight, so is everyone okay with moving on at this point?
I'm sorry, I do have one more question.
Sure. Here, let me.
I'm curious about how far along in the strategic planning process you might want to get before, like how this decision and strategic planning talk to each other.
Yeah, so what's interesting about our strategic plan process, I think what you'll find at the end of the day is we'll have, mission and vision, goal areas. We'll probably get a little bit more into the details on strategic objectives to achieve those goal areas. I am confident that no matter what plan we choose, even if we stayed with our original plan, we will work together to implement those strategic objectives. So I don't really see that as, I don't think that this needs to be done before that. I don't think that needs to be done before this.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, then we've got 2 more items, then public comment. Next one is to approve the first reading of new board policy 7322, procurement of supplies, materials, equipment, and services using federal funds. This is more complicated than it needs to be, probably in the sense that it's pretty much mandated by legal counsel and federal law. So Pat, if you can walk us through, I don't know if we need to talk about them separately or if they're generally related, or just keep them separate. I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, they're related in the sense that they're both based upon federal laws, as mentioned, and I think involved quite a bit of time by our attorney to pull them together. The first on procurement is related to federal funds, and I really think this is what our auditors had in mind when they made a comment a few years ago. And so this captures expectations when we're procuring materials or supplies with federal funds. There's a reference to affirmative steps to assure that minority businesses, women's business enterprises, and labor surplus areas firms are used. The CFR addresses some of the ways of doing that, and it's not necessarily through a scoring mechanism in the RFP, but it's through using solicitation lists and through direct solicitations, through using organizations, Department of Commerce organizations, breaking up projects into smaller quantities so that they're more available for performance by smaller businesses and minority businesses. Otherwise, a lot of what's here is really what's in play under state statute, certainly conflict of interest. There's certainly expectations for greater economy and efficiency in purchasing. So we'll incorporate some procedures to go along with both of these policies. The nutrition policy, I also, there's some good provisions that are included here. We do lots of bids for food service products and commodities, and what's added is the geographic preference and Buy American components, which I think are interesting and beneficial to our food service program. So also quite a bit of procedures we'll work with our staff to incorporate in adoption of these policies, but otherwise compliant.
Any, excuse me, any questions for Pat on new board policy 7322, which is the supplies, materials, equipment, and services? Okay.
I guess sort of two parts. One is, do we buy a lot of supplies, materials, et cetera, with federal funds particularly? And then number two, how might this change like actual practice on the ground from what we're currently doing?
Yeah, that's a great question, and sort of my question initially with it is that there is not a significant amount of procurement using federal funds. I mean, we do have certainly our title programs, we have a Perkins program, and those would be the main areas that you would see those federal funds and purchases, but rarely do they exceed bid limits. And so what the procedures will address is sort of different levels of bid limits. So there's minority, I can't remember the verbiage, but it's minimal purchases or less than $5,000. And so each of the bid thresholds have certain relaxed bidding requirements. In a lot of ways, it doesn't change a lot from what we do. But I think the big change was just the reference to assure minority businesses and women businesses are used when possible. So that is a difference that would be at play with federal funds. But yeah, I mean, you're right on. There aren't many procurements along those lines.
Like, did we use federal funds in the Ag Center, for example? Would that have been something where we would have had to maybe do things a little differently?
Not really. There's been purchases with federal funds at the Ag Center. Otherwise, bond proceeds and donations. But Perkins purchases are typically not in itself significant. So we'll purchase some volumes of equipment, maybe for family and consumer science or for CTE programs. The big one at the Ag Center was a tractor that was purchased a few years ago, and that was CTE, some CTE funds, or Perkins funds. So there are ones that crop up. They're just few and far between. But yeah, that's a good point.
Any other questions? And just to clarify, this is a new policy. We haven't had one yet. So legal counsel recommends that we need one.
Exactly, yeah, that's right.
Any other questions? So the recommendation is that we approve the policy, or that we approve the policy for first reading and that it will be posted for public comment upon approval of first reading, and we'd probably see it back in March. Is there a motion to approve on first reading new board policies 7322 and to have it posted for public comment? Is there such a motion? Moved by trustee Decker and seconded by trustee Wake. Is there any board discussion? I'll just add that I know that you work closely with legal counsel, and this took a bit of work to get this all worked out, so thank you for that. Any public comment? Any other board comment? Public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of the motion to approve the first reading of new board policy 7322 and to have it posted for public comment, please indicate by raising your hand. That is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to the first reading of new board policy 8205, which has to do more specifically with procurement of school food. The recommendation is that the trustees approve for first reading new board policy 8205 and have it posted for public comment. Is there a motion to do so? Oh, sure, yep. Sorry, I thought nope, we can ask questions.
Okay, so on policy 8205, under geographic preference, it says procurement of unprocessed, locally grown or locally raised domestic products. I'm wondering if that word really has to be there. I think, first of all, it's up for interpretation, and second, certain foods have to be processed to be preserved, and so, first of all, that seems like the kind of word that isn't useful or necessary, so I wonder if you can find out if that's necessary. Yeah. And then the other is, if the cost of domestic products is significantly higher, the definition of significant, it seems like that's something that should be defined, at least in procedure, or right here in the policy, as some number like 50% or something.
Trustee Lorenzen, as I understand it, there might be a need to be more specific in procedures that would be adopted so that there's better guidance for terms such as significantly higher. And what was the other word, unprocessed?
Well, unprocessed, I'd personally like to see it out if we could.
Okay.
But if we can't take it out, then yeah, then it would have to be defined.
So would it be possible to pull this one, check with legal counsel and see if we can take that word out and then bring this one back, but move forward on the next one? With that, so if there's a motion to table this so that we can check with legal counsel about that recommendation, it's moved by trustee Wake, seconded by trustee Lorenzen to table this, to ask that question of legal counsel. And so any further board discussion on the motion to table? Sure. Okay.
I have no idea how we get our food from the Ag Center. Do we pay for that? We do. And would we ever make a purchase in excess of $80,000 for food from there?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. We're so early in the stages of it, but certainly it's being purchased, it's being used, and it's possible.
So they would have to participate in the bid process under this policy? Is there a way to not have them participate in the bid process? Yeah, would that apply, the geographic preference? We could dispense with the bid requirement?
Yeah, and I think there'd be a number of qualifications that could potentially apply to that purchase. And I mean, the Ag Center program itself is an educational program and an educational delivery model. It's not as its primary function there to generate profit. So, but I think it's a good question. I think that you have, anytime you have the potential for somebody being excluded from a bidding opportunity, that'd be one we'd want to look at for sure. Yep, exactly.
So since the motion's on the table, the motion on the table is to table this proposal, a lot of tables. Could you also check with legal counsel to see if there would be a need to address in policy the uniqueness of the fact that we have an egg center on our campus, and whether or not it needs to be written into the policy that things that are on our campuses get a higher preference than other things, or if that can be handled by procedure in case the egg program went away or whatever. So I think that's a really good idea to check that out. Any other suggestions in terms of any other things to have legal counsel and Pat look at? Seeing none, then any public comment on the motion to table? It's on the table. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to table this to allow legal counsel in the business office to look into this further, please indicate by raising your hand. Thanks. It passes. And then it's public comment time on non-agenda items for people who couldn't get here early. No one is again racing to the podium, so we're adjourned. Thank you so much for your time.